Hello, viewers and listeners. This is SiriusXM, channel 479, the channel that brings you your daily historical fiction piece excerpts. Our story for this week is a book by Laurie Halse Anderson, Nobel Prize winner for children's literature, Fever 1793. Our first excerpt is from chapter 16, and this chapter reveals a lot about the story from the perspective of a person who hasn't read the full text. Here's a few excerpts from chapter 16. For number 1, we have, "These are trying times. They seem to bring out the best and worst in people around us. We sat in silence, watching as the slate roofs of the houses on the outskirts of the city came into view. Mosquitoes, gnats, and flies followed the wagon, drawn by the smell of the sweating children and horses. 'How old are you, Matilda?' 14, 15 in December. 'And are you feeling recovered from your illness? Fully recovered?' I nodded. My only complaint is that my stomach grumbles all the time." She smiled and shifted the child in her arms. "That is normal enough for someone your age, if I may inquire." She began delicately. "Yes. Have you considered what you might do to help? You have recovered, so you cannot get the fever again. You are young and strong, and we have a real need for you. How can I help anyone? I'm just a girl." As soon as the words were out of my mouth, I wanted to pinch myself. The first time anyone treats me like a woman, and I respond like an infant. "You're much more than a girl. Let me assure you of that." And that's the end of the excerpt. This excerpt explains what the yellow fever was like for people impacted by it. And the excerpt explains that the fever is only a one-time thing for a person. So, after a person is infected with the yellow fever, after the fever passes out of your body, you're immune to the virus. Our protagonist, Matilda here, is now sort of, you could say, immune to the virus and can now help fellow peers who are infected by the virus. And our second excerpt is as follows. "Mrs. Bowles patted my arm. 'Don't fret, Matilda. If you like, you may choose to take employment at the orphanage. I'm sure the trustees would improve a small wage if you helped with the cleaning or minding the children. They have for Susanna. She'll help with the laundry.' Susanna didn't look strong enough to wash a teaspoon, much less a tub full of clothing. 'What will happen to her when the fever is over?' I whispered. Mrs. Bowles lowered her voice. 'She's at a difficult age. She's too old to be treated as a child, but not old enough to be released on her own. Her parents own a small house. The trustees will sell that and use the money for her dowry. We will hire her out to work as a servant or scullery maid. She's attractive enough. I'm sure she'll find a husband.'" That's the end of the excerpt. Okay, so this excerpt tells us that our protagonist, Matilda, is presented with an opportunity for employment at the orphanage because she is immune to the yellow fever and can give attention to and help orphans who have the fever and have nobody care for them. Another character, Susanna, still has the yellow fever and cannot work, although she is an adult. This shows that even though a teenager who does not have yellow fever can work, an adult with yellow fever cannot work. All right, and our third excerpt is as follows. It's a man. Stop the wagon. We must help him." "He is past helping, miss," the driver said as he urged on the horses. I checked him on the way out to fetch you this morning. He were too far gone to go to the hospital. His family tossed him out so as they would not catch the fever. The death cart will get him soon for burying. I couldn't help but stare at the wagon rolled by the stoop. He looked about 17 and wore all tailored clothes stained with the effects of the fever. Only his polished boots remained clean. His yellow eyes stared lifelessly at the clouds, and flies collected on his open mouth. Won't there be a burial? A church service? I asked as the driver turned east onto Walnut Street. Most preachers are sick or too exhausted to rise from their beds. A few stay in the square during the day. That takes care of the praying. How could the city have changed so much? The yellow fever was wrestling the life out of Philadelphia, infecting the cobblestones, the trees, the nature of the people. Was I living through another nightmare? This final excerpt explains the struggles of people who are weak to the yellow fever and are dead and will die from yellow fever. Once a person has gone too sick, the family of the person will just throw them out in hopes of not getting yellow fever. This also tells us how the yellow fever can make a full town look so different, so barren, lifeless, and hopeless for all the people living there. These 3 excerpts make up a whole chapter. The whole chapter. So that's it, folks. Tune in tomorrow for chapter 17. This is SiriusXM channel 479. See you next time. Hello, viewers and listeners. This is SiriusXM channel 479, the channel that brings you your daily historical fiction piece excerpts. Our story for this week is a book by Laura Halse Anderson, Nobel Prize winner for children's literature, Fever 1793. Our second excerpt is from chapter 17, 1 after 16. Here is an excerpt from chapter 17, as follows. Grandfather, hurry. The front room was a jumble. Tables and chairs lay helter-skelter. The clock was missing from the mantel. The pewter candle holders were nowhere to be found. King George's bird cage lay open on the floor in pieces, as if smashed by a heavy boot. Grandfather hadn't seen the foul-mouthed parrot in days. Had he come home and fallen off again? The destruction of the kitchen was greater. Broken pottery covered the floor. The doors of the pantry stood open, and Eliza's crocks of preservers, the sugar cone, and her spice cabinet were missing. The coffee and tea canisters lay on their sides, empty. The dried meat, beans, and onions that usually hung from the ceiling had vanished. Even the kitchen table was overturned. Something crunched behind me. I rolled around, but it was only Grandfather picking his way across the broken plates. What happened here? He asked quietly. His eyes moved over the mess, but it did not look like he could make sense of it. I was just here a few days ago. I locked the door. Maddie, I'm sure. His voice was on the edge of trembling. This excerpt from the text tells us that the coffee shop had been robbed and trashed around. Our protagonist meets her grandpa and reunites with him. She notices that her mom and her mentor, Eliza, are gone. She decides to tell her grandpa to go take a nap. And in the meantime, Matilda, our protagonist, decides to clean up the shop. This is the only meaningful excerpt from chapter 17 that I could find. So sorry for the short episode. Tune in tomorrow for the last excerpt from Fever 1793. This is Sirius XM channel 479. See you next time. Hello, viewers and listeners. This is channel 479 on Sirius XM, the channel that brings you your daily historical fiction piece excerpts. Our story for this week is a book by Laura Hulse Anderson, a Nobel Prize winner for children's literature, Fever 1793. Our last but not least excerpt is from chapter 18, One After 17. This time we actually have more than one excerpt. We have two this time. So here's a few excerpts from chapter 18. One as follows. It felt strange to take a bath like this. The house so quiet, no sound from the street. Alone except for a noisy orange cat. I usually bathe once a month or for special occasions. I stuck my leg up in the air and rubbed it with soap. This felt like a special occasion. The water soon turned brown with weeks of dirt and sweat. I held my breath and dunked my head under the water. I scrubbed my hair with soap and dunked it again, over and over, until my hair was free of blood and filth. I rubbed the soap on a rag and scrubbed my skin until it burned. When even the soles of my feet were clean, I dried myself by the kitchen fire. This excerpt explains to us that most people didn't even shower during the yellow fever. Matilda tells us before the excerpt that she only showers once a month or on special occasions, which it's in the excerpt. Sorry about that, guys. This could be a factor in some of the deaths involving yellow fever because they were weak and dirty. And our second excerpt is as follows. Supper was a royal feast of boiled potatoes seasoned with a scrawny turnip and a few beans. But there was enough to ease the ache in our stomachs. Grandfather found a small bag of roasted coffee beans and thieves that the thieves had overlooked. And he cooked a pot for us, army style. Hot mud would have tasted better, but he was so pleased with himself. I forced myself to drink it. For some sugar and cream. I was ready to fall asleep before the sun set. I carefully pushed the coals to the back of the fireplace and covered them with ashes. I drew a final bucket of water, washed dishes, and set them on the table. I never did understand why Mother made me dry the dishes. I left them on the table. They would be dry by morning. After I dumped the wash water at the base of the cherry tree, I dragged up the stairs, ready to fall back into bed. Grandfather had already collapsed on his covers, snoring loud enough to shake the stars from the sky. The noise was unbearable. If I stayed, I'd get no sleep at all. I carried my blankets downstairs to the front room and made a soft pallet on the floor. This excerpt tells us that Matilda and her grandpa had a proper breakfast meal. Before the excerpt, the text tells us that Matilda made a soup that was even better than her usual water with herbs, but not by much. The excerpt also tells us how people washed their clothes back then, and shows how Matilda is responsible enough for taking care of both her grandpa and the coffee shop. These two excerpts are the only pieces of text I can find to explain in detail. Thank you for tuning in to this story. Next week we will cover another story like it, but no spoilers. This is SiriusXM channel 479, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.